What's up, everybody? We're here, episode 16 of Queen City Reds. We got a special guest with us here today, Clay Snowden. You can find all Clay's stuff at Just Baseball. You can find him on Twitter, X, whatever we call it these days, at Clay_Snow. That's Clay_SNO. Clay, thanks for joining me today. How are you?
Man, I'm excited. I haven't been on yet, so I'm very excited to have the my first appearance here.
Yeah, I love it. We've talked a lot on Twitter and whatnot back and forth, but never officially in any setting like this. So happy to finally do it. Long overdue for sure. But obviously the big news of the week, and I thought this is what we were going to talk about basically the whole show until the Reds just announced had all sorts of other news that came out today. But obviously, last Thursday, the Reds decided they were going to hire Terry Francona at about 10 p.m. at night. The news came out. I play basketball on Thursday nights, and I was like out having a couple drinks with my friends. And I looked down at my phone and it says the Reds hired Terry Francona, and my night just changed for the better.
Yeah,
So, what are your kind of initial thoughts on the hiring? Do you like it? Are you excited? Kind of just tell us your thoughts.
I'll start by saying what I always say, and that's manager has the least amount of impact of any head coach, air quotes, in sports, in my opinion.
I agree.
So right off the bat, it's not. I think Francona is going to come in and add 20 wins. Like that's not how I see it personally. However, I'm glad that they moved on from David Bell. That's something I thought it was just time to do. And immediately my mind went to Terry Francona just because of his track record and his, winning multiple World Series and taking other teams far. And I felt like this is the time in the Reds life cycle that they needed somebody with experience, somebody with, that type of, I guess, resume to come in. I was really not interested in doing another new guy who doesn't have any experience. That was not my preferred path. Again, I think it's the best candidate. I don't really know about like the ins and outs of how he's going to use, the bullpen or when he wants to pull starting pitchers or lefty splits and all of that stuff. Like we'll see what that looks like. But overall, I don't know how you can't at least be excited about Terry Francona.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. I kind of was the same way. Me and my buddy Paul were on here last week and we're talking about how it's so different in baseball when wanting like a coach or manager as opposed to like football or basketball. You pick guys based on schemes or you want to see them run the no huddle offense or whatever it may
Yeah.
be. Baseball is just a little bit different. Like it's kind of a culture thing. Yeah, you can have certain guys that let guys go deeper into games or use their bullpen a little bit more, but it's a little bit different. So I'm totally with you on the managers um, don't quite matter as much as we think they are.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm with you. Like I'm so excited. You just hear the name Terry Francona, and he's won Manager of the Year I think three times. He's a World Series champion twice. Um, it just is one of those hires that kind of makes you excited. And the other thing I agree with you on is I wasn't. I know like Will Venable was a big name out there, but I was kind of wanted somebody with some experience after Brian Price and David Bell both being hired with no experience. Now, not to say it doesn't matter. I mean, you look at like a team like the Guardians hired Stephen Vogt, and the Guardians are awesome this year.
Yeah.
So it can kind of be a crapshoot, but I totally agree with you on both those parts. That I'm just excited they got somebody that has had some success in the past and is a big name per se.
Yeah, and part of being a manager is managing that clubhouse. And, it may sound cliche or like who really cares? These guys are professionals. They should work hard either way. Like we've all had a boss that sucked. And like they may have been good at doing the actual job, but every aspect outside of that sucked. Like these guys spend 200 days together in a row. Like you don't want somebody who you don't get along with or who is just a bad personality or doesn't fit, doesn't match. That part of it is more important than it might seem just at the surface. And like I already said, we'll see how he does in terms of just X's and O's of it, if you will. But I mean, he has a track record that you can put up with anybody right now. And in terms of just someone being available and the Reds getting what everybody else would say is the top guy, like I'm just really excited about that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I was kind of I didn't think the Reds would fire David Bell. I was kind of probably say, I don't know, 55-45 if I wanted them to get rid of him. I guess if you made me choose, I would say, yeah, it's probably time for a new voice. And I think that's probably the reason is sometimes after a guy's been there so long, it's just not that Dave Bell was there forever, but he was there a while. I think
Yeah, 6 years.
2018.
Yeah.
And like sometimes you guys get too comfortable. Everybody says he's a great players manager. You saw, even kind of saw it with Jonathan India's quotes of like we got along with David sometimes almost too friendly. So I think sometimes it's just like it's just good to have a new voice and somebody that like it's like you said when you get a new boss and whatnot, you kind of put your guard up a little bit. Like, okay, this is something new. Like we have to earn our spots. Like we have to, really go prove ourselves. Um, and I think that, excites me about it more than anything. So, I think, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited that the Reds got somebody that, like I said, has some experience and a big name like Terry Francona. Um, just going into that off of they obviously introduced him yesterday at 10 a.m. He had a press conference. He did all sorts of different media outlets yesterday. Anything that he said in the press conference that sort of stuck out to you, or anything that you want to hit on regarding what he, all of his everything he said with the media yesterday?
Yeah, I don't have the direct quotes in front of me, but I remember reading them and listening to the press conference and thinking like he's saying all the right things, which yeah, like okay, that's a simple box to check, but it's not a box that the Reds have often checked in press conferences recently. I mean, if you really think about it,
It's
and
true.
this isn't me talking poorly about David Bell, but comparing him to David Bell, it's a lot different personality, a lot different um, kind of just how he presents himself to the media is much more welcoming, in my opinion, and something that you could say doesn't matter at all. And maybe it doesn't, but when you were listening to David Bell say the same canned message with no emotion at all, no inflection in his voice for the 46th time in a season, it's kind of just refreshing to hear something different. He jokes a little bit, and he's kind of got this I don't want to say like old man humor to him, but a little bit of an older guy
Yeah, that's
humor
what it is, I
to him.
think. Even the little
Yeah,
joke they joked about, he said he would do jumping jacks for him to show off his
yeah,
health or whatever. Like
yeah,
that's like a classic dad joke.
yeah, exactly. So just that press conference alone was a breath of fresh air into the organization, and I think he's excited about the opportunity. I don't see this as Terry Francona just wanting to get back into baseball and this was the only opportunity type of a deal. Like I don't see it that way at all. Like I think he was only going to come back for the right situation. And the Reds are a historic franchise, and they do have a good history. It hasn't been good recently, but I think he sees the talent on the roster, the talent coming up, and man, I hope that they see this as page one in a new book of turning towards legitimate competitive baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it's funny, you're totally right. Like I always say, like I always kind of said, and I would, defend David Bell from time to time of saying like there's no guys, we don't know that he doesn't actually hold his players accountable. He's just not coming out and saying it
Yeah,
to the media. But like you said, like I think that's probably why fans got, part of gotten so tired of David Bell is like they'd be 5 games under 500 with like 30 games to go, and he's like, today was just another day. We got to get back to it tomorrow. The guys the
yeah,
guys played great. And it's like
it's the
nobody wants to hear
messaging.
that, nobody wants to hear that. And because it almost comes off like you don't care. And I don't think that's the truth. Like I think we saw David Bell's a competitive guy when he gets out there and screams at umpires, but he was always just going to be the guy that I'm not going to throw my guys under the bus in the media. But it was almost the press conferences would come off like Bill Belichick-esque,
Yeah,
and when you're not winning, people just get tired of that. And I think one of the things that stood out to me yesterday, same thing, like he kind of, you come out and you have coaches that win the press conference. It makes it a little bit more worthy when it's a guy like Terry Francona when he doesn't have to win the press conference. He can just say, look at what I've done.
hmm
But even his little comment of like, my favorite thing to do is get in my uniform and go kick some ass. Like
yeah,
that excites me, and I don't know why.
yeah.
I guess it's just as fans, like we get excited when we hear that type of thing because he clearly still has like the fiery mentality and wants to go win.
Yeah, and the unknown is undefeated always. We don't know what this is going to look like, and we can look at the past and say this is awesome. And I do not think it's a Tony La Russa White Sox situation at all. I really don't. I think that's totally different. But they had the same idea too of like, hey, here's the guy who's. So I do want to see a little bit before I just like claim the Reds are going to win the World Series or anything crazy. But um, just having some different voice there is going to help a lot.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm super excited. It's nice to have something to be excited about this early in the off season. I mean, the playoffs are still going on. So pretty cool. Anything else with his press conference or anything else just in general on Francona before we kind of move on to any of the other topics?
No, I think we'll touch on kind of the rest of his staff and how that's going to fill out. But that's going to be really interesting to watch, especially just how quickly that moves.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's a perfect transition, kind of into our next topic. The Reds today just announced they fired their three hitting coaches, which I'm not even going to lie, I didn't even know the Reds had three hitting coaches on the roster. So you couldn't tell by what they did this year, I'll tell you that. Derek Johnson also has announced he's back, but we'll first start on just, or not, he didn't announce he's back, but the Reds said he's back. We'll first start with just the hitting coaches in whole. Are you a big, I know people go back and forth. I mean, right. Again, I probably am usually on the positive side of things when it comes to, being more positive than negative. But I know people right when the Reds started to struggle this year, they were just blaming the hitting coach and hitting coach. And I kind of am on the side of, you know, it's hard for me to blame hitting coaches sometimes in like professional sports or blame like coaches, but at the same time, like because you go like last year, all these young guys overachieved. So if you're and it was the same, it was Joel McCathan was the hitting coach. So was he great last year and then this year he just sucked,
Yeah.
or like what happened? But at the same time, you got to we're talking about you got to hold guys accountable. It's hard to have as many guys regress this year as they did and just be like, oh, let's bring them back. So what is your just, thoughts on position coaches like hitting coach and that kind of thing as
The
a whole?
way I look at those coaches is pretty much very standoffish. I really don't have much opinion on it because we never once will get to see them work with players. We don't have any actual evidence that we can go off of. So the way that I kind of form my opinions is by trusting people much smarter than me. So if I see a bunch of national writers or people that, you read an article and like there's people you trust in baseball with their information. If they are praising a certain position coach, pitching coach, hitting coach, whatever, like I'm going to put that in the back of my mind. And the more often I see that, people who interview people who are in the clubhouse, people who see more than we can see as fans, the more that I'll lean towards that opinion as well. Now, of course, it has to translate on the field. If it's this pitching coach is awesome, he's great, and the pitchers struggle with the same thing, and you don't see tangible adjustments throughout the year, then I just find that difficult to believe. But in terms of just this team sucks at hitting, the hitting coach is bad, I do not subscribe to that. The Reds have had so many hitting coaches in the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it's been. It's crazy. You mentioned that you don't even know that they had three. Neither did I. Like
Yeah.
I really don't pay much attention to it because I don't see the value in paying attention to it because there's nothing I can draw from them personally. I can
Right.
only take it from other people and trust their opinions. There's nothing I can see and have evidence with my own eyes that I can make a conclusion from.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I kind of compare it to like sometimes offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators in football. Like, I think they do matter, but also it matters with like how the guys are playing. Like,
Yeah.
I always joke about like Zach Taylor was an offensive coordinator for Cincinnati in the year they went under Tommy Tuberville and they went like 4-12 or something or 4-8, whatever it was. And like 3 years later, he was the Cincinnati Bengals head coach because of
Yeah.
how good his offense was. Like sometimes if you just don't have the talent or you just have guys underperforming, it's hard to blame the coach. And you made a great point, I think, of we don't see the behind the scenes. So it's hard to just automatically point the picture of it. Hey, it's this guy's
And
fault.
that's the thing in other sports. Offensive coordinator, like you can watch a film and understand they're showing two high safeties. Why are we doing this deep
Yeah.
post into them over and over? Where's this? There's stuff you can take away. What exactly can you take away, especially with so many of these players having private pitching coaches, private hitting coaches, doing the stuff in the off season that may be away from the team's hitting coach? There's just too much to dig in and like really set an opinion. Again, unless there's like evidence. Like the example I'll use is like I obviously follow the Tigers as well. And like Chris Federer, everyone talks about how amazing he is as a pitching coach. And you keep seeing them bring up these no-name guys and they're effective. And you can tell, oh, well, now they're all throwing sinkers. And here's how they're like, you can kind of see the strategy there with a larger sample size as well and be like, okay, that is the evidence I'm looking for. I haven't seen that type of evidence in terms of just like the Reds that I can say it's the hitting coach's fault. I'm glad that they're willing to fire them in order to let Terry Francona build out his staff the way he wants it. It's very weird when a new person takes over any work situation and the previous second and thirds in charge stay. It does work sometimes, but it's more common in every work situation that there's a trickle down effect. We see it in football all the time, basketball as well. So to me, it's good. Like I'm glad that they're not forcing their hand and saying, "Here, Terry, you're the manager. Everyone else is the same." Let him bring in who he wants.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think I have much to add on that. I'm with you. It's hard to really um know how much to blame a guy
Yeah,
like that. And I got a question for you. This is just a little funny question. What did the infield coach, I can't remember his name. What did he do that when they fired David Bell a week before the season, they're like, "Hey, buddy, we're going to keep everybody else, but you're out of
Jeff
here
Baker.
too."
Yeah,
What did he
yeah.
do? What dirt did he have on Nick Kroll that they sent him out right away as well?
They usually like those type of coaches usually have more than one task. Um, and I believe he Um, I actually don't want to say that because I don't know if that's true at all. But he has more than one task, and I guess the other task too played into it not going too well. So I don't know, but at the end of the day, like it's I think keeping Derek Johnson's a good thing. You got a lot of young pitchers that have worked with him, and I think that it's going well. So keeping him is good. Again, infield coach, honestly, I don't care at all. Like if he's
Exactly.
gone.
I don't either.
And I know that like that's somebody losing their job and that sounds shallow. That's just part of working in sports. Like it's a short life. You gotta win, you gotta produce. And going back to David Bell, that's why I was predicting he would get fired. It wasn't even as much as I need this guy out, I hate this guy, it's all his fault, as much as it is. Look around the league in any sport. How many coaches last this long without showing for it? They're
Yeah.
the number one fall guy. Owners are never going to blame themselves, which puts who next on the chopping block? Nick Kroll. That's
Yep.
how blame goes in sports. Fair or not, that's the evidence we have through history showing that's the trickle down. So now the pressure's on Nick Kroll.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, I just brought up the infield coach just generally because I was like, man, that guy must have done something wrong if
You
he's
got
the
to
only
call it.
assistant to get canned.
Yeah,
But I'm with you. I'm generally a fan of Derek Johnson. I feel like he's done a pretty good job. It's funny, he's almost the opposite of McCathan because last year I feel like people were all the way off on Derek Johnson.
yeah,
And then this year, Hunter Green had an awesome year. Rhett Lauder came up and was awesome. You had guys like Tony Santillan come back and kind of show resurgent. Nick Martinez was fantastic. But again, it just shows that people are up and down on coaches on just success. So, but I think
yeah.
overall, I'm a fan of Derek Johnson. I like that they're keeping him.
Yeah, and I've even questioned Derek Johnson at times, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
Like you see Luke Weaver leave, make one or two changes, and he's good. Like, why can't we figure that out? Like, I don't think Derek Johnson is this on a pedestal, the most amazing pitching coach ever. Just from the evidence, the little bit of evidence that we have of certain players figuring out this one tweak, this one change, and being
Yeah.
successful. Like, why didn't we have that insight? Where was the disconnect? And I know there's a lot more that goes into it. It's never that black and white. And there have been players that have come here, changed the thing, and been successful. Like it's not all evidence in the other way. So overall, I do think he's good. I don't know if he is quite what he was made out to be when he was hired. It sounded just the hype around him made it sound like, get ready, everyone. Like we are about to have the most elite pitching staff of all time. And yeah, it hasn't quite worked out that way, but I was happy that he was staying around.
Yeah, no, good stuff for sure, and I completely agree. I mean, it kind of works. It kind of works both ways, and you never know which kind of way to blame or give praise,
Yeah,
whatever. But anything else on the?
we just don't have the information. And at the
Yeah,
end of the day,
exactly.
it is
That's what it comes down
okay.
to.
Too often on a certain website, we all think that we have to put out, we being Twitter users of any kind, put
That's
out
right.
definite things. Like it's okay to say, I don't know. Like I don't have the information, and neither does anyone else on this website talking about it, honestly.
That wouldn't be as fun though on
Yeah.
Phillips.com. Then we just get on there and be like, oh, we don't
He's
know,
gonna
guys.
yell at us if we do that. Yeah.
That's right. Awesome. Good stuff. Anything else that you can add? Anything else you want to add on anything on the coaching staff before we move on?
Yeah, I don't think that Joey Votto is going to be part of the coaching staff. I still see that around, and I get like the idea of why somebody would want that and just like a fairy tale land, but I just don't see that.
Yeah, I agree. It made me laugh when the Reds were looking for a new manager, and it was like Joey Votto, hitting coach, Barry Larkin, manager, and Johnny Cueto, pitching coach.
Yeah,
Guys, I'm not sure that's how it works, but it
Johnny
is.
Cueto, who still doesn't really speak English fluently, which is not me knocking him. Just that's just like a difficult position to put somebody in as a pitching coach.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, moving on to the news, some of the news that came out today. The Reds announced that Elly De La Cruz is going to be the shortstop, and Matt McLain is open to switching positions or trying out new positions. I think they specifically mentioned third base and center field, which I found center field very interesting with him. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but what are your thoughts just on Elly staying at shortstop and Matt McLain kind of being open to changing positions?
Back when Ellie was called up, I thought he would be a better third baseman, to be honest with you. That was my initial thought. I wanted McLean at short, Ellie at third. Everyone's happy, good left side of the infield. After seeing him play shortstop, I'm very happy that he's staying there. I really am. And you can point to the errors, you can point to the lazy mistakes. I do think like that's the type of stuff that can be cleaned up. And I'll say it relatively easily as well. You cannot teach range. You cannot teach arm like he has. Like you cannot figure that out in an off season. You can figure out the routine ground ball that you boot because you aren't paying 100% attention. I'm saying that I don't know that for sure. That's what I'm assuming. You can fix those mistakes in one off season. One. And next thing you know, you have a truly elite shortstop without all the errors to back it up. Now, some of those errors are because he gets to balls no one else gets to, tries to make a remarkable play, and it's a throwing. Like that happens too. McLean played a little bit of short when he first, or excuse me, a little bit of third when he first went to the Arizona Fall League. Tested him out there. I understand why some people want to move people out of the infield into the outfield. It makes sense. I am a little bit concerned about McLean's arm as a center fielder. Like I do not think that would look good. There's two things that I see this as. It's one would be we want to be flexible in order to add the most impactful player at whatever position.
Yeah.
So if that means the most impactful position that they can get is a second baseman, good. We already have a contingency plan to have somebody else in the outfield. If it means it's an outfielder, okay, good. We can keep McLean at second. That's what I hope. And I know we all can joke about that word. Hope the plan is. If the plan is doing this so they can just get as many rookie contracts and cheap players on the roster at once, then I'm worried about that for sure. I think McLean would be fine. And I was saying this throughout the year, like all the people saying Ellie to outfield, like why is no one saying McLean to outfield? He's the guy who actually played it in college. Like why wasn't anyone saying that? So I just always thought it was bizarre, but versatility is never a bad thing. I just hope that's not the plan to address the outfield.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you on Ellie sticking at shortstop. I think I always used the stat outs above average, and I know that's not the perfect stat by any means, but the people that point to errors act like the good plays just don't exist. And that stat, whether you fully believe it or not, it takes in um, it takes into account things like range and things like plays that most guys don't make. And with the 29 errors and him leading the league, he was still third across all shortstops at 15 outs above average. So I look at that and say, okay, if you clean up the plays that you said, like you said, that you can fix, he could jump up to first on that list and be the best defensive shortstop in baseball. And the other thing is, I get scared of seeing Elly in center field, of him crashing into a wall or him
Yes.
diving like TJ Friedel. Like, I even worry about that a little bit with McLain because he's such a good, he's such a good hitter that I would hate guys like him or Elly to get out there diving for balls or crashing into walls. And now
Yeah.
you're without him for, I mean, we saw it 3 times with TJ Friedel this year. And let's be real, Friedel's bat does not have the impact of Elly's bat or Matt McLain's bat. So I'm almost more of like, yeah, I like what they do defensively, but the center field thing scares me of just being able to stay healthy.
Yeah. That's scary as well. And just to touch on the error thing, Bobby Wood Jr. had 17 errors this year. Like good players make, errors. That's just how it goes. Look at OAA across the people that you think are the best fielders, and you will understand that it's a good set for defense. It
Yeah.
does have flaws. Errors are also up to an individual person's judgment, a official score's judgment. This is not. This is more of a computer based, which I know some people will say, "Oh yeah, I hate the computers, all this," but
Those are the same
to
people that
me,
only look at errors.
yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of different ways you can get an error, and a lot more goes into that. But either way, yeah, moving somebody to the outfield, man, it's so unfair. But like, you just keep having flashbacks of like the Jose Barrera outfield experiment and the Nick Senzel outfield experiment. And so you just kind of have to wonder, like, maybe we should just keep these players where they're maybe, and spend some money, trade a prospect, whatever the route may be, to finding somebody who is an established outfielder. I want to see better defense. Like, that's what I want to see. Watching bad defense is hard to do, and we've been doing it for too long. I think you need to improve the defense, and I don't think the easiest route to doing that is moving players around.
Yeah, you just made me think about the Yonder Alonso left field days out there in Wrigley Field. When we were going to put Yonder Alonso out in left field
Yeah.
just to find find
Joey
room for him
Votto,
in the lineup.
Joey Votto tried left field as well in AAA.
I
When he was,
remember that. I think
yeah.
he ever play? I think he even played a couple in the majors. Maybe I'm wrong
I
on
don't
that.
know if he actually did, but I remember being at the Bats game and watching him shag fly balls, the entire series in left field and like getting some work in left field. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure you're looking it up right now. So
Yeah, I'm
I
gonna
will
see if I can find it.
filibuster a little bit while you do that. But yeah, the Joey Votto outfield experiment would have been interesting. But yeah, if you're gonna improve defense,
It looks like he
I
played
yeah,
6 games there in 2007. 6 games in
okay,
the outfield in 2007.
yeah, yeah.
Or yeah,
So
6 games. 6 games all in left field.
yeah,
So
man.
that's hilarious to think back upon. But anything else on the Elly and Matt McLain situation? I think it's I mean it's interesting. I'm glad like it seems like we're both glad Elly will stick at shortstop and then kind
Yeah,
of open the idea of McLain moving, but not really something where
they
he's got.
brought up India in this discussion as well, playing some third. Um, I don't know what to read into that because last year we heard about him playing all over the field. Now injuries hit, and maybe that was part of it, but we really didn't see him used in a way that they kind of made it sound like he would be used. The India being included in here, like, I don't know if that's them just doing their due diligence and wanting more multiple players, or if it's really like we have a plan for India in 2025 to be on this team. Because everything, I keep going back and forth. Like, I'll read a quote, I'll see a video and say, man, that sounds like India's not coming back. Like, he's going to be moved. He's still under contract though. And then I'll see the next quote that's, hey, India could be playing third base. Like, that's a future plan move. Like, he's part of the plans for 2025. So I keep going back and forth on
Yeah, I almost feel like the Reds when Matt McLain got hurt. they just were like, okay, scratch that plan. We're just putting Jonathan India at second base,
Yeah,
which I don't think I necessarily agree with. I mean, there were at times this year Santiago Espinal was clearly the better person to play at second base. And the Reds would DH Santiago Espinal, which is also wild to look back on. He did have some, good games and whatnot towards the end of the year, but yeah, I kind of just feel like they just made that as excuse as, hey, McLain's hurt. We're just going to keep India at
yeah.
second base. So. All right. Well, moving on to the last topic. We talked about a couple of these guys, Matt McLain, Christian Encarnacion-Strand, Connor Phillips are some of the key names playing in the Arizona Fall League. I think the Reds team is actually playing right now. I think they kicked off about 4:30 Eastern time. The Glendale Diamond Dogs or something like that is their name. Fun little fact that I put out on Twitter today, Matt McLain's brother is actually on the team, so he's going
Yeah,
to play with
yeah.
his brother, which is kind of cool. But what will you be looking at in those games? What do you take from those games to just kind of be like, is Matt McLain, healthy, or are you looking at anything in particular with like CES? Because he struggled when he was up. What do you kind of take from those games as a
For
whole?
those who aren't as familiar with the Arizona Fall League, it is typically a mixture of guys who are about to be Rule 5 eligible, meaning in December they could be on a different team. The reason they reach that is usually because they've been in the minors for a long period of time. They're 26 years old, like kind of fringe guys.
Kind of like a Tyler Callahan for the Reds, who I think he might be 24 or so now, but he's been in the
Yeah,
minors for a good. He was a former top 30 prospect. He's not
but then
anymore,
you
but
but then you get pitchers like Ricky Karcher. Like
yeah,
you get a whole lot of different levels of talent.
yeah,
So in terms of just reading stats and making anything of it, like I just don't know. It's small sample size. Everyone is freaked out about Noelvi Marte, and then was he good? Was he not good? What happened? There's a lot to read into it. The Reds sent a very weird roster. You don't see guys like Matt McLain in the AFL ever. Like that was a very odd move. Now I'm sure the reasoning is simple as we want to get him some innings, and that's great. Same with Edwin Arroyo. Like CES had that injury, but like it's kind of weird to see guys who have played a decent amount in the majors at the AFL. So I don't really know what to take away from it. I'm glad that they're getting innings. I would like to see something out of CS. Rather, that's a bit of a swing change, or maybe his timing looks better. He just looked so bad when he was
yeah.
playing last year. So those are really like the two I take away. And Edwin Arroyo, like let's just see if he's healthy. Tyler Callahan, you mentioned, that's a guy who was a second round draft pick and dealt with a lot of injuries coming up and really swung it well the second part of this season in the minors and play some infield, started to play some outfield. We'll see. Like it comes down to how many of those we'll see types can you fit on a 40-man roster? Because
Right.
the Reds have several already, and Blake Dunn, Jacob Hurtubise, like those level of I don't really know, maybe French, maybe not, re-signs. Like how many of those do you want on your 40-man roster? Because in my mind, they should be adding talent that pushes everybody down a spot on the 40
Right.
man. Instead of adding from the bottom and pushing everyone up, add more proven or better talent in various ways for agency trade, whatever, that makes your Blake Dunn's the last man on the 40 man. You don't have three of those level of players all on the 40 man.
Yeah, no, I think that those are good
I just
points.
went off on a tangent there from AFL to talking about 40 man roster construction. I don't really know how I landed there.
No, that was fantastic. That was fantastic. I think I'm with you. You don't know what to take from that. It's kind of like you never know what to take from spring training because they're throwing guys out there that half of them aren't going to see the field. Half of them, aren't using their full arsenal. They're working on things. But then I am just excited that, guys like McLain, CES, Connor Phillips, and Edwin Arroyo
Yeah,
who
Connor Phillips.
didn't,
Yeah.
yeah, who didn't play like Phillips was out in Arizona just working on stuff because he was so bad to start the year. Arroyo played in spring training. Matt McLain's played in spring training, and CS played for a couple months. And when he did, he was one of the worst players in the league, I think. So like, I'm just excited to see them get some live at bats. Yeah, obviously it's not going to be to against top tier talent. One name just randomly that came to my head. You said the randomness of talent in there. I think Jack Caglione is playing in the Arizona Fall League, which is kind of wild. He was a first
Yeah,
top five draft pick, I think, maybe top seven. I'm
yeah,
not sure when he got picked, but last year. So which just goes to show you got guys who've been in the minors for 6, 7 years, and you got guys that are drafted last year. You got major
yeah.
leaguers. It's all over the place. It really is. So
And Connor Phillips, I forgot to mention him. Thanks for bringing his name back up. He's the one that I think you can really take away a lot from because you could just see like his biggest issue has always been
command.
command,
Yeah.
right? So we can see that. Like we can see how that looks. I don't even care if he gets hit around. I just, if you locate a fastball in the outside corner and it gets poked into right field for a double, I'm okay with that because I want to see if he can locate it on the outside of the zone. Like that's what I'm looking for from him. I don't really care about the stats. I care about how many times he can throw a baseball in the strike zone. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. And he did look better his last towards the last
Yeah, he
end of the
did.
year. His first couple starts back from Arizona, I was like, oh man, it doesn't look like much has
Yeah.
changed. And then towards the end, he really looked a lot better. And I mean, there was one game he even, like you said, he even got hit around a little, but I saw 0 walks and I was like, that's the most encouraging thing I've seen. So I'm with you. I'm excited about Connor Phillips. He's one of those guys that like even when he has like games where he throws 6 shutout and he has like 5 walks, I just like turn the eye to the walks and
Yeah.
act like it's not an issue because I want him to be good. But it'll be
I've
interesting.
always struggled. Like I was really excited about him when he was younger, like right once we got him. The more I watched him in the minors, the more I was like, oh man, like he went fastball to get back into counts. He gets down 3-0 against a single A guy. Well, he had an elite fastball and he could just work that to get back into accounts. Like I did not think that strategy would work as he got further up. And this isn't me patting myself on the back. It's me just kind of explaining more of maybe why it didn't click. And he had so many uncompetitive pitches. If you start off 1-0 in a count, but it's a slider that just creeped outside it's a righty, let's say glove side slider that sweeps to the outside of the zone. That's still a good pitch, even
Yeah.
though it's 1-0 because it can set up a fastball, it can set up your other pitches. When you throw a fastball that never looked like it was going to go in the zone, that 1-0 is a lot different.
And he
And
has a
he had a
lot of
lot
those.
of the
He
latter.
has a lot of those. Yeah. You're watching him and you'll see like guys getting their head out of the way. Like he'd about
Yeah.
hit him in the face. So
Balls bouncing way in front of the plate and stuff. I mean, it was wild.
well, I got one more for you. This wasn't part of the topics that I
Okay.
gave you, but it just made me think of it as you were talking. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. What do you make of two guys that I really want to talk about here? Will Benson's just crazy year after he was so good last year, and then Noelvi Marte's second half. Obviously, they're much different players. Benson is a couple years older. He played most of last year and looked great. Noelvi Marte is still only 22 years old, and was suspended the first 80 games. But just what are your thoughts on the 2 seasons they kind of had? And are you still high on a guy like Marte? Is Benson going to start in AAA, you think,
Yeah.
next year? What are your
I'll
thoughts?
I'll start with Benson. And as much I love Will Benson, like the guy,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he's
He's so
fun.
much
I
fun
think
to watch.
everybody knows that.
Yeah.
I was super worried about him and I'm not a big expected stats guy to begin with. His slugging was like 100 points higher than his expected in 2023. And I was kind of watching him. He saw a ton of strikeouts, and it was a lot of tools to be excited about. But it just kept coming back to my head too. Like the Guardians are a good organization, and they were willing to just kind of ship this guy off, and they did not have a solid outfield situation to begin with. I mean, how many Cleveland Guardians outfielders could you really name? You being a random person who's listening to this, like it
Yeah.
wasn't like they had this huge depth and whatnot. I mean, Miles Straw was starting for them at one point, and they extended him. So when he came to the Reds, I was excited about the tools, worried about the swing and miss. We saw times he connected and went well. This past year, man, like you are a platoon player and your numbers need to be, in my opinion, the way I look at platoons is if I'm a platoon only, I better be 20% better against that platoon for him
Right.
against righties. I better be 20% or higher, or else I'm not that valuable.
Yeah.
Even if I'm a 110 WRC plus with some pop and whatnot, like, yeah, but you're not providing the other, against lefties, you're a hole. And like you have to be significantly better if you're going to be platoon only, or else it can be a waste of a roster spot at times. As much as I like Will Benson, I think this is the opportunity to make him a depth piece. He can start the minors. That's not a big deal. Everyone looks at that as game over, curtains. It's not. A
Yeah.
lot of players go down to the minors, get better, figure it out, whatever it may be, but you can't keep hoping the Will Bensons of the world all click, especially at the same time. You have to improve the outfield. He can be an injury replacement, but there's no fault of starting him and Reese Hines and Blake Dunn and Jacob Hurtubise and all those guys in the minors or off the 40 man if it needs to be that way. Um, Somebody from that group, Hurtubise, is getting cut off the 40 man at some point, I think.
Yeah, and you do
Well,
look
then,
at this one thing real quick. You do look at like you mentioned, it's not the end of the world going down the minors. Like that's what kind of resurrected his season last year.
yeah.
Is he was so bad at the beginning of the year, and he went down there, and I think he's a guy that plays with confidence. And when it's going bad, it just goes bad. And last year he went down and worked on some things and got some confidence back, and then he came up and was a different player. Now I'm not saying you start him in AAA next year and he's going to hit 280 again, but at least like you could tell at the end of the year, the dude had no confidence at all. Like he had no confidence. It was just, he was changing at the end, he was changing his batting stance. And like, anytime you're doing that in season, like you're just not sure, what's going on in his head. So
It may be as simple as this. Terry Francona knows him from the Guardians. Like, if Terry Francona did not want him on his roster, that may be all that we need to know. And I'm not saying that is the case, but
yeah,
that could be like if he doesn't fit the philosophy or the type of hitter, because essentially he's going to be a bench bat. I think his days of being counted on as a starter are over with the Reds. He would have to do a lot to get back there. Maybe Francona doesn't like a bench bat that's a platoon only, swing and miss lefty who may run into a home run. That may not be his style. We'll see. Noelvi Marte was the most disappointing part of the Red season, in my opinion. Um, he there was so much around him since he's been traded. There's been this injury. There's this whole rumor of like he's slower than he used to be. Oh, he's overweight. No, he wasn't. He came in, looked fine, and like he
yeah,
stole bags and he looked really good at 2023. Boom, injury in the fall league last year, I believe.
yep,
And then
hamstring, I think.
the steroid deal, or performance enhancing, I don't even know the correct term these days, whatever it was, substance that he got suspended for. And then he came back and looked awful. He looked awful in the minors too when he was coming through. And we all said, okay, it's spring training, it's getting your feet under you. And I believed that as well.
Yeah,
I just don't think it was the case. And there were flashes. I think it was against or in Miami when he drove a ball out to right center that looked like a great swing and like something that most players just don't have. You don't just like run into that by accident. Um, so that's kind of what I was thinking with Marte. We'll see. Like his defense was terrible. Like I don't think he can play third. Again, that's something you can clean up, and we do see people improve defensively at a faster rate than offensively. So we'll see what that looks like. But I just think you need a really solid plan B, rather that be Candy, who is a different discussion, or
yeah.
they mentioned India at third, McLain, whatever it is. Like you need a good plan B there.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think by any means Marte's just penciled into the starting lineup next year. I think I would probably venture he has a little bit more a lot more of a chance than someone like Will Benson, just because the potential. I think he'd need to have probably a big spring training, and still who knows. But it's just an interesting discussion. I wanted to get your thoughts on it because those are two guys that the Reds were counting on in 2024, and they got essentially nothing from. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
all good stuff. Well, Clay, I won't keep you any longer. Thanks for hopping on. Again, you
It's
can
perfect
find,
timing. I
yeah,
just heard my wife yell, hello, which means she got home. I did not tell her I was doing this so she could bust through this door at any moment.
that's awesome. Well, you can find Clay's stuff on Just Baseball. It's justbaseball.com. Is that correct?
Yep. Yep.
Justbaseball.com, and on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. He's Clay_Snow. That's SNO. So Clay, thanks for coming on. I know we joked. We haven't done this yet. We've talked forever now, but appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll do it again sometime.
Appreciate it. Go Reds.
Go Reds.